I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, the dark horse gets in the driver's seat at the world's most valuable unicorn. How Expedia's Dara Khosrowshahi won the race to run Uber. Plus, Amazon's Whole Foods opens officially for business by throwing prices on the chopping block. We will itemize the revised grocery list and discuss what lower prices mean for the competition. And there might be a wall between President Trump and Silicon Valley, but the administration is going all in on cybersecurity. We'll break down the plan to up the ante against hackers and militants in the cyberspace war. First, to our lead. Uber picked Expedia's Dara Khosrowshahi as its CEO, according to people familiar with the matter. In a statement obtained by Bloomberg Technology, Expedia chair Barry Diller said, "If Dara does leave us, it will be to my great regret, but also my blessing." Shares of Expedia fell about 4% on the news. Khosrowshahi, a deal maker and an outspoken critic of President Trump, beat out competition from Hewlett-Packard Enterprises' Meg Whitman and GE's Jeff Immelt, who were both in the running for the final job. He succeeds co-founder Travis Kalanick, whose aggressive management style was met with heavy criticism in the last year, eventually getting ousted in June. Joining us now for reaction, Lane Castleman, former head of communications at Uber during a time of massive growth at the startup, and our Bloomberg Tech reporter Eric Newcomer, who covers all things Uber and can give us the play-by-play. So, what happened?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we've been talking about Meg Whitman, Jeff Immelt, and then it's this dark horse candidate sort of out of nowhere.
How did the board get there?
I think we're still trying to figure it out. I mean, it seemed clear that Benchmark had supported Whitman, and that Travis's camp had resisted that, and perhaps supported Immelt. But a lot of the dynamics on the final day we don't really understand. I mean, Whitman, we reported, came in. Now my timing's going to get mixed up. Is it Saturday? It's been a blur over the weekend, and talked to the board. So it was definitely very serious. And Immelt sort of pulls out after that. So that we have that crazy period of time. Ultimately, we know that the board voted unanimously for the new CEO.
Unanimously, okay.
Yeah. So some sort of agreement was reached, but hard to know whether this was sort of the result of a long negotiation where nobody got their favored candidate, or there was more support than we realized for the dark horse here.
Lane, having worked at Uber, having worked with Travis, knowing that Travis was on the board and in the room when all of this was happening, what do you make of this choice?
I mean, I think it's a super exciting choice for the people that work at Uber, but I think it's going to be really challenging for Dara. There's a company that's fiercely loyal to Travis and to Emil and to Ryan, to the leadership founders that are now leaving and are on their way out. And so he's got a lot of work to do ahead of him. He's got to convince 15,000 employees that he has their best interests at heart, and he's got to get them all playing for the front of the jersey. That's going to be pretty tough. Now,
Eric, you wrote a very daunting list of to-dos. Right. Number one, recruiting. I mean, there isn't a deep bench.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of great talent at Uber, but a lot of junior talent. I mean, they need a serious chief financial officer as soon as possible, probably a head of operations. I mean, there are three sort of GMs running the region divided up around the world. Had reported to Jeff Jones, the president who left. Now they report to no one, and so they'll probably need a COO or some sort of head of operations. And there's no chief marketing officer. Legal needs to be shorn up. They need a general counsel. So I could just keep naming vacant positions. They need an independent board chair. So that decision will obviously have to come from the board and the new CEO. But there's a lot of empty seats that need to be filled pretty soon.
Now, Dara Khosrowshahi, I've interviewed him a couple times, but obviously this is someone that, we're going to get to know over the years. I'm curious, Lane, why you think it's an exciting choice. I mean, we know his record at Expedia. We know he did some big deals, including buying HomeAway and buying Orbitz. We know he was the CFO at IAC for many years. Uber certainly does need some deep financial expertise. What do you think he really brings to the table?
Well, I've talked to a lot of former employees and current employees in the past 24 hours to get their reactions. And really, it seemed like everybody at the company wanted somebody who could help deal with some of the issues the company's been dealing with over the past few months. It's pretty clear that there was a strong desire for a female leader. But since that didn't happen, I think they're pretty happy that there's an immigrant leader who can probably best represent the interests of multicultural, diverse base of drivers and employees who are all over the world, and even communities that are very different from each other in different countries. So I think there's a lot of excitement.
Right, and these are the problems that Uber started with, allegations from Susan Fowler about sexual harassment, disappointment from the community that Travis was on President Trump's business council.
Right.
So the fact that Dara Khosrowshahi has been very outspoken about President Trump certainly brings a new perspective to the table.
Yeah, he's been super outspoken about Trump, probably one of the most in Silicon Valley. Last I checked, it was like his most recent tweet was about Trump. So
he talked about the remarks after Charlottesville and said that Trump had repeatedly failed the expectations of the office.
Yeah. So I think for Uber, which operates in cities with, sort of polarized liberal constituency, both in drivers and riders, having an outspoken sort of CEO on this issue has proven super important, and I think that'll be useful to them.
Lane, how do you imagine Dara is going to work with Travis and what Travis's involvement might be?
Yeah, I think it's probably too early to count Travis out. I suspect he's going to stay involved and probably significantly involved. If I was Dara, probably one of the first things I would do is build an alliance with Travis, get rid of kind of all the petty bickering on the board level, and then start focusing on how they're going to work together to make sure the day-to-day operations of the company are fluid and that they set their sights on what's next, hopefully a big IPO.
Eric, I know you've been really trying to figure out the boardroom dynamics. Who wanted what? What did Travis want? I mean, where do you think Travis is on this right now?
I think he, not unhappy. I think we could certainly say that, maybe happy. I mean, I think he seemed to be very worried about Meg Whitman from everything we've learned, and this seems like, not his enemy's candidate, perhaps, at least how it's viewed right now. And I mean, I think a key fact here is that the board didn't seem to solve its own problems in picking the CEO. Like, Benchmark is still suing Travis over his 3 board seats. As far as we can tell, there hasn't been some sort of grand negotiation like we might have hoped. And it seemed like Whitman had some of these sorts of requests. It seems like with Dara, we get a new CEO, but everything else sort of remains unsolved, and Travis's relationship with the new CEO is yet to be defined. Is he an advisor? Does he have an actual operating title? Or is he just a board member?
And that lawsuit with Benchmark ongoing. Just today, Travis filed a motion asking for it to be moved into private arbitration.
Exactly.
We're going to continue to follow that, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later in the show. All right, Eric, newcomer for us, our Bloomberg Tech reporter. We've got an end, at least one end point, I should say.
It always feels that way, I think.
We'll see what happens tomorrow. Lane Castleman, who worked at Uber for a long time, thank you so much for joining us. All right, Hurricane Harvey has now been downgraded to a tropical storm. It has drifted back into the Gulf of Mexico and is poised to regain strength before crashing into the Texas-Louisiana border. In the wake of the unprecedented natural disaster, some tech firms are stepping up rescue and relief efforts. Amazon and Whole Foods announced today they will match donations made via the Amazon website to the Red Cross, while Microsoft pledged $100,000 to the organization and said more will come. Coming up, Whole Foods may not be the whole paycheck anymore. We'll bring you the changes to Amazon. Changes Amazon is already bringing to the grocery chain next. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. A story we are watching. South Korea's Samsung is investing $7 billion in flash memory chips. The 3-year investment will go toward its Xi'an plant. Samsung's memory chip business has helped become more profitable than Apple in its most recent quarter. The announcement comes just days after a Seoul court sentenced Vice Chair J.Y. Lee to 5 years in prison for his role in a bribery scandal. While wasting no time, Amazon is spending its first day as the owner of Whole Foods, cutting prices by as much as 43%. Markdown items can be seen with orange signs reading Whole Foods and Amazon, with the old and new prices listed. In a sign of how the retailer is changing, the Amazon Echo is also on sale for $99.99, a sharp pivot into electronics for a company traditionally known for kale and quinoa. Joining us now from New York, James Chakmak, analyst at Monness, Crespi & Hart, and here in the studio, Bloomberg Technology's Olivia Zaleski, who went to Whole Foods this morning and was checking out prices. What did you see?
Yeah, I was there this morning. Lots of price cuts. We can see them on bananas. We saw them on lean beef. Peanut butter was a big one.
Specifically the avocados, that's all I want to know.
You only care about the avocados. They were down about $1. My favorite, rotisserie chicken, organic rotisserie chicken, was down about $5, which is a huge price cut.
Was it crowded?
It was really crowded. And I spoke to a number of people who said that they had held off on their big weekend shop because they wanted to go Monday to get the big savings.
Interesting, James, that you would see Amazon Echoes in the store. Olivia, I know you saw those when you were there. I mean, do you think that people are going to be buying these at Whole Foods while they're grocery shopping?
Buying the Echoes?
Yeah.
Possibly. I mean, I do think that the Echo is actually the first successful entry into the living room. We're seeing it trying to be copied by Apple and Google. Obviously not as successful as the Echo. But I think when you think about the whole Whole Foods transaction for Amazon, I think that this is just another point to underscore the deflationary impact that you're seeing from Amazon across all of retail. And as you increase the touch points with the customer, especially as it relates to grocery, I think that the opportunity is not just limited to the grocery here, but think bigger picture into restaurants, into prepared foods, and all the way down the supply chain. I think you're going to feel the effects. So a big win for Amazon to actually get this deal to be approved by the FTC.
Now, within the grocery business itself, I mean, how do you see grocery competitors responding, whether it's Costco or Walmart or Kroger?
I don't think you can. The problem is that the business models are so different. What Amazon has the opportunity to do is operate at a target 0% margin. And they are able to do that because of the fact that the business is subsidized through the cash flow proceeds from AWS. There's no grocer that has that luxury, and no retailer that has that luxury. That's why you continue to be able to see a deflationary impact from Amazon. But I think as you look longer term, it's just this grocery is a massive step toward capturing an even greater part of the broader economy.
Olivia, what's next?
I think what we can see next is exactly what James is pointing out, which is greater touch points. So Amazon really wants you to be the retailer for everything. And I spoke to some people that were in the store today who said they traditionally buy their paper towels, their toilet paper at a Costco or a Target. And they said now they'd probably consider doing it all through Amazon Whole Foods because it's just easier to have it in one place. And especially if they're a Prime member, they can get those deals, the savings that they get through their Prime membership.
So, James, the other question is, look, these price cuts are great, but how long can they last?
Indefinitely, because investors are conditioned to virtually 0% margins because what the stock trades on is the theoretical margin that the company could get to should it pull back and exercise pricing power. But that's not in the company's DNA. And you asked about kind of to Olivia what are the next opportunities. I think that it's just not limited to grocery. You have to think about the other areas that they're looking into. You have the pharmaceutical element that they could potentially explore. You have media. They're going to become the single largest investor in original content after Netflix, surpassing Netflix likely in the near future. So, and advertising, capturing advertising dollars. So I think that there's every opportunity that they're pursuing is $500 billion or more. So I think the fact that the government approved this without blinking, really, I think you can't stop this train.
Do you think that Amazon will try to significantly expand the number of Whole Foods stores?
I don't think you need to. I mean, you have about 500 locations all around the most important markets around the country, the most affluent markets. I think that you do expand on the distribution capabilities and leverage your logistical network and use Whole Foods as a commissary to encroach onto restaurants with prepared foods and whatnot. But I think as far as the actual footprint of restaurants, of Whole Foods themselves, I think that there's a lot of opportunity with the existing base that they can leverage.
All right, James Chakmak of Monness, Crespi & Hart, you are sticking with me. Bloomberg Tech's Olivia Zaleski, thanks so much. I'm going to head there this weekend to check it out for myself. All right, coming up, Google and Facebook continue to dominate global ad dollars, but has the space hit its peak? We'll break it down next. This is Bloomberg. We have breaking news to tell you about now coming from the Japanese government. The Japanese government saying A missile from North Korea appears to have flown over Japan. Again, this coming from the Japanese government, that a North Korean missile appears to have flown over Japan. Of course, we have seen the war of words escalating between President Trump and the North Korean regime. We're getting headlines in, and we will bring you more information as we have them. Now to another story we are watching. Facebook will block ad pages from sites that repeatedly share false news. The repeat offenders will not be allowed to advertise on its platform. Currently, Facebook does not allow advertisers to run ads that link to stories marked false by third-party fact-checking organizations. To further dig into the global ad space, James Chakmak of Monness, Crespi & Hart is still with us. So, James, you make the assertion that the global ad market may have peaked. What makes you think so?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the global ad market, $600 billion, a big sum of money, and it's always hovered around 1 to 2% of GDP for quite some time. But I think two things are happening. The first thing is that you are seeing a trend toward the lower end of the range in terms of contribution to the broader economy because of the fact that ad dollars are going further because of measurability and targeting capabilities. So you're smarter about your spend and you're spending less. But I think the bigger phenomenon to kind of, I guess, continue on our previous discussion on Amazon is that you're seeing the eradication of brands and brand affinity in the market. I mean, just with WPP's results last week, the world's largest advertiser, you saw CPG, consumer packaged goods companies, their sales shortfalls there leading to massive reductions in advertising spend. And I think if you have a company like Amazon pushing commodities down and making decisions about function and price over the brand, I think that you could wipe out an entire portion of the brand advertising market that exists today. So I think that we may be in a situation where the growth of Amazon and the growth of targeting capabilities may lead to a shrinking absolute dollar of ad spend as we look forward.
So obviously Facebook and Google are the giants in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Do they only get stronger even if the pie shrinks?
Yes, I think that it's Facebook, Google, and then it's everybody else. So I think you'll have diminishing relevancy of other media channels, all the traditional ones. I mean, you look at, for example, television time spent actually increased last year, but advertising fell. You had advertising dollars fall across every channel: television, print, radio, and even internet desktop. The only place where it's growing is mobile, and the two companies that command mobile are Google and Facebook. But the fact of the matter is, I think that the mix shift of the falling of the traditional assets along with internet is not enough to be made up by the growth of mobile.
So what does that mean for everybody else trying to take a bigger slice of this market, whether it is Snapchat or Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, Snapchat, the interesting thing about Snapchat is I thought that they had the best pulse on what it means to have successful mobile content. What they were hitting on with Discover, I thought, was excellent. And they were securing deals in order to capitalize on that with premium content providers. So if they are able to execute on that, they can certainly serve as a third-party alternative. They haven't been showing us that they're able to do that yet, which is why it's somewhat disappointing. But I think the Facebook-Google duopoly is hard to shake. But the market does want an alternative. So, I mean, I'm rooting for Snapchat, at least on a personal level, to succeed.
And we were talking about Amazon earlier, but Amazon is also a giant potentially in this fight. What is Amazon doing that could potentially really change the game when it comes to online advertising?
Well, it's interesting because they are also one of the top 10 advertisers in the market. So they're potentially shrinking the market, but at the same time, they're also a big contributor. The way I think about it is, when you have all these retailers suffering, in the offline worlds, you're going to want to be able to, go to where the attention is. And the attention is all increasingly shifting toward Amazon. And if the attention is there, I have to find a way in order to differentiate my product from the next one on Amazon. And that's where the advertising dollars open up. So I think that a lot of these dollars that are being spent in everywhere else, aside from Facebook and Google, can be captured by an Amazon. So I think that what has been a 2-horse race can very quickly become a 3-horse one.
So if indeed the pie is getting smaller, how much smaller does it get?
Theoretically, I think it can fall by a third. I mean, that's assuming that all brands are eradicated. I don't see that happening, but you could see, a 10%, 20% reduction, conceivably in overall and spend, because I think marketing departments at the same time will also face a lot stricter parameters of operation, because it's not going to be about long-term campaigns. I think increasingly it's going to be about short-term results. So that short-term thinking can reduce dollars. And then, of course, the fact that if you're no longer trying to pitch the Energizer Bunny versus Amazon Basics batteries, that's going to have an effect as well. So, I mean, we're talking, the consumer packaged goods industry is the largest spender in the market, and then it's falling.
All right, by a third, that could be pretty dramatic. We'll be watching. James Chakmak, analyst at Monness, Crespi and Hart. Thank you, as always, for stopping by. We are continuing to monitor that breaking news out of Asia. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe now reporting about this missile that has appeared to have been fired from North Korea over Japan. We're getting headlines in from the Japanese government, from the South Korean government. We'll bring you some more news as we have them after this quick break.
I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of First Word News. First, to a developing story, North Korea has reportedly fired an apparent missile in the direction of northern Japan. That's according to the Japanese government and multiple local news agencies. It's unclear what kind of missile was launched by Pyongyang. We'll have more on this as it develops. During a joint press conference with visiting Finnish President Sauli Niinisto, President Trump discussed recovery efforts in hurricane-ravaged parts of Texas and Louisiana. Harvey, now a tropical storm, is the first major natural disaster of Mr. Trump's presidency.
My administration is coordinating closely with state and local authorities in Texas and Louisiana to save lives, and we thank our first responders and all of those involved in their efforts.
President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump are scheduled to visit Texas on Tuesday. The Associated Press, citing local leaders in Sierra Leone, reports that more than 1,000 people have died from the mudslide and flood that hit the capital, Freetown, 2 weeks ago. The EU and UK kicked off a third round of negotiations in Brussels Monday, with chief EU Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier warning the May administration needs to be more forthcoming about where it stands on the terms of the separation. Almost 5 months of discussion have made little headway. The UK released a batch of position papers last week to outline its position. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. here in New York, 7:30 Tuesday morning in Melbourne. I'm joined by Bloomberg's David Stringer with a look at the markets. David, good morning.
Good morning. And look, traders in Asia already looking to digest that breaking news out of the region and looking at the potential for impacts from what we're hearing out of Japan and the news that North Korea appears to have fired a missile toward that country. And that could exacerbate some of the themes that traders here were already looking to. Gold had a big upward move overnight on news out of the US and Tropical Storm Harvey. They're looking potentially for gold to break through that 1350 barrier. Certainly we should see haven demand as a result of the news out of Japan and North Korea. Also, a weak yen. That was already something that traders here were looking for, and potentially we'll see that as a result of this move. There'll also be jobs data out of Japan later, and we'll also see consumer confidence.
We're continuing to get breaking news headlines out of Japan. These headlines coming in from the Japanese government and the South Korean government. Now we're seeing that the Japanese government saying multiple missiles appear to have been fired by North Korea. Missiles likely to have landed off the eastern coast of Hokkaido, which is the northernmost of the main Japanese islands. The first missile, we believe, according to the Japanese government, flew over Japan about 6:06 a.m., was launched from North Korea at 5:57 a.m. local time. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been speaking on Japanese media. He says that they are doing everything they can to ensure the safety of the Japanese people. They're gathering information on this missile firing as quickly as they can. We actually do have a Bloomberg News reporter, our Bloomberg News reporter, Geroid Reddy, joining us now from Tokyo. Geroid, now that I have you on the phone, what do we know? Okay, Geroid we're in the process of joining us, but just to recap, it appears that North Korea has fired several missiles over Japan. Initially, we had just gotten a report about one missile flying over Hokkaido, the northernmost of the main Japanese islands. Geroid is with me on the phone now. So Geroid, first of all, what do we know?
Well, it's a very confusing situation right now. We certainly know that a missile, at least one missile, appears to have been fired. It appears to have passed over Japan's northernmost prefecture of Hokkaido. The latest information is saying that, according to Japan's national broadcaster, is saying that the missile appears to have landed in the sea east of Hokkaido. There's now conflicting information just coming in right now about whether it was multiple missiles. There's also, I'm just seeing right now that it's possible that the missile may have broken into several pieces, but certainly we know that the missile overflew Japan, and it appears to have landed in the Pacific.
I'm seeing a headline, Geroid, that the missile, or at least one missile, likely landed off the eastern coast of Hokkaido. If indeed that happened, what does that mean?
Well, it's hard to tell right now, in terms of what it means. There's no indication of what type of missiles these were, or what their intended target was. Certainly, the Japanese government will be on increased standby, but there's no information basically now on what the intention of these missile launches was.
All right, we're still trying to figure out, of course, exactly what has happened here. But I do want to talk a little bit. I'm sure you have followed the war of words between President Trump and the North Korean regime. President Trump drawing a sort of theoretical red line. It was difficult to sort of understand exactly what he meant by that. But how has that been received in your part of the world?
To be honest, in this part of the world, it has been more business as usual than you might think. I think, seeing it from the U.S., these types of launches and these types of threats have been a consistent event on and off over the last several years. So I don't think people have been any more significantly worried than they normally would be. But certainly right now, the threats towards Guam were quite specific. A couple of weeks ago, this does not appear to be that. It would not be the route that the missile would take, or that North Korea said that those missiles would take if they were trying to fire them towards Guam. But obviously people are always on standby for the North Korean threat here.
Talk to us a little bit about how we got to this point. Obviously, North Korea has been known to test these missiles. They have had this program going now for several years. Talk to us a little bit about how we got here.
Well, it really has been it's been such a back and forth for many years between between Kim's father's era, when there was, I think just about 10 years ago, that it was, no, so about 15 years ago now, actually, the six-party talks, the historic visits to Pyongyang by the Prime Minister at the time, Koizumi. Now we're in one of the phases where we get threats like this all of the time. It's really hard to tell. I think if this launch will be any more received any more significantly than the ones that we've seen over the last week, and at the end of the day, I think one of the things that was said is that there are pretty limited options here. So obviously Japan is scrambling to take care of this. And I'm sure the resultant harsh language and UN Security Council issues will come out. But here we are now once again with one of these.
All right, just to recap those headlines coming from the Japanese government, that North Korea appears to have fired at least one missile that landed off the eastern coast of Hokkaido, that it has broken up into 3 parts in the Sea of Japan. Obviously, we're continuing to monitor those headlines. Bloomberg Scaroid ready in Tokyo. Thank you so much for calling in and giving us that quick update. We'll be back with more breaking news after this quick break. We return now to our other big tech story today. Uber tapping Expedia's Dara Khosrowshahi to be its CEO. For more reaction, I want to bring in Brad Stone, our senior executive editor at Bloomberg Technology, who wrote a book about Uber and former CEO Travis Kalanick. So what's your reaction? What do you think of this?
I was surprised, like everybody else, because so much of this process had leaked. Of course, people knew the names of other candidates, Meg Whitman of HP, Jeff Immelt of GE, but Dara's a savvy choice, right, for a couple of reasons. One, he's run a company in a fast-moving internet industry, right, that's not HP or GE. 2, he's built a homegrown, cutting-edge tech stack, basically a tech platform that allows for different kinds of transactions, different kinds of brands. He ran with Expedia, a company of 20,000 young people, right? Uber is, a lot of young millennials there. And he has at Expedia faced Behemoth and Priceline that's also kind of trial by fire. So I think actually the experience at Expedia will translate quite nicely into most of the things he has to do at Uber.
What about some of the, the experience with the travel industry and Uber, being a transportation company, sort of moving into that next level?
I mean, it's a marketplace with all the complications of marketplaces. You've got customers and riders, or passengers in the case of Expedia, travelers. You have drivers, right? Who as a group weren't very happy with Travis's leadership at Uber. But now, with Dara, who actually himself is an immigrant, came from Iran at the age of 9. Someone who perhaps is a much more sympathetic figure to that largely kind of irate driver community now. All the challenges of balancing supply and demand. I think it's one of the reasons why Meg Whitman was so attractive to the Uber board. But Dara, with his experience at Expedia, brings the same skill set over.
So what happened? I mean, what do we know about why Whitman and Immelt didn't work out?
I mean, what I know comes mostly from my colleague.
Which happened on the day of the finale of Game of Thrones.
Right, very fitting. But it comes mostly from my colleague Eric Newcomer, who has covered this quite well for us. And the benchmark and its allies really wanted Meg Whitman. Mm-hmm. Travis, who's kind of clinging to a seat at the table, clearly wanted Jeff Immelt. The sides are at loggerheads. It's turned into litigation in the state of Delaware. Dara comes in really, it seems to me, as a consensus candidate, and perhaps someone who could bridge these two sides, settle the litigation, get everyone on the same page. I mean, that's going to probably come down to Bill Gurley from Benchmark and Travis Kalanick, still on the Uber board of directors, getting over the personal enmity that's between them and moving forward for the good of the company.
So let's talk about Travis. I mean, what do you expect his role in the company to be? And do you think he will be always gunning to get back into that job?
I know what he wants it to be. I mean, he clearly wants to continue to be an advisor, an influential board member, someone who continues to contribute. You know, he has always talked about Uber as family, as a spouse, as a child, in these personal terms, and you just can't see him walking away. The problem is he's become symbolic for so many of the controversies and enmities and divisions at the company that he probably, you know, it might be better, even if he doesn't see it, for him to at least take some time heavily in the background. That's really the tension right now. Dara, you know, any new CEO needs some running space, needs to be able to put his or her imprint on the company. So I think there's probably still going to be some tension around what Travis's role is going to be. I don't think any of that is resolved.
So the company is making a lot of money, but it's also losing a lot of money. I mean, can Dara, get the ships aligned and focus on the important thing, which is getting the business in shape, right?
You know, that is always, in a lot of these high growth tech companies, it's really always a function of how hard you want to be pressing on the accelerator. I mean, any good operator is going to have levers to make more money or less money, to lose more money or less money. So it's really a matter of will. Does Uber want to continue to compete in some of these far-flung areas and countries in Asia and Europe and lose money, or does it want to ratchet back on the growth, get to profitability, perhaps look better for an IPO in 2018? You know, Dara has a lot of experience running a public company. I'm sure that's very attractive to the Uber board, and competing in some of these very, you know, ferociously competitive and money-losing markets. So I do expect, I mean, Travis had a growth at all costs mentality. You expect Dara to ratchet it back a little.
Like take the foot off the gas.
And maybe particularly if SoftBank invests in Uber, which is also tied up in this.
Exactly. So is that happening?
Well, we don't know, right? That's going to be one of his first decisions. And it's, remember, that's also tied up in the dynamic between Benchmark and Travis, because SoftBank would be buying some secondary shares from existing stockholders. So, you know, it's massively complicated and personal. So one of the first things he has to do is kind of negotiate an outcome between all these players. It's a good sign that they went and alighted on a candidate, Dara, who both sides seem to be able to get behind. So they agree on something.
You know the company well. You know, we're just getting to know Dara Khosrowshahi, but in a year from now, where do you expect we'll be? Do you think that these issues will get ironed out, the personnel issues, and that the focus will return to the business?
It has to. They have to get past this. I mean, I think it's possible they settle this, you know, soon anyway. It's so destructive for the morale and the long-term benefit and success of Uber. In 2018, if everything goes back to where it should be, they're preparing for an IPO, and the attention is where it probably should have been all along, which is, can Uber succeed in a self-driving car future? And that's probably the biggest question about Dara as a CEO of Uber. You know, he doesn't necessarily come with the tech chops to go and lead that company into this you know, inevitable age of driverless cars. Can he do a better job of Travis, who, you know, obviously made a controversial acquisition of Otto with Anthony Lewandowski and the whole Waymo lawsuit? Can Dara do a better job preparing Uber for that inevitable future?
All right, Brad Stone, our senior executive editor of Bloomberg Tech. Thanks so much. Great to hear your insight. We'll see a year from now. All right, back to our breaking news out of Asia. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe speaking to reporters in Tokyo, saying the missile, a single missile, appeared to have passed over airspace, and that the government was urgently collecting intelligence on the incident and doing everything to ensure the safety of its citizens. This, according to remarks made on the broadcast NHK. South Korea will be holding a national security meeting at 7 a.m. local time. Again, this missile was launched from North Korea, we believe, just before 6 a.m. local time, landing off the coast of Hokkaido. We will have more details next. This is Bloomberg. All right, we're continuing to monitor breaking news out of Japan, where the Japanese government says that a North Korean missile has been fired and passed over the northernmost island of Japan. Yoshihide Suga, Japan's chief cabinet secretary, has confirmed the missile, says that this is a serious new development, but that there are no reports of any damage. According to the headlines, the missile likely fell about 1,180 kilometers off the coast of Hokkaido. Joining me now from Washington, D.C. to discuss, the director of George Mason School of Law's National Security Institute, Jamil Jaffer, who also served as the former chief counsel and senior advisor to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So, Jamil, I have to ask you, first of all, what is your reaction to this news, and just how serious is it?
Well, look, Emily, I think this is a big move by the North Koreans. It's problematic because it actually flew over Japanese airspace over the island of Hokkaido, which is troubling news. They've shot missiles before into the Sea of Japan, which Japan has been very concerned about. But this is a change in pace and kind of troubling.
So what makes this one different?
Well, look, having sort of violated Japanese airspace, having flown the missile over, suggests, making Japan report to its people that a missile may be inbound. That's concerning from a defensive perspective for Japan. They've always known that North Korea has the capability of reaching Japan with their ballistic missiles, in fact, reaching much further now today. But this is sort of a provocative move, I think.
There's been concern about the remarks that President Trump has made about North Korea, concern about Trump's approach. What do you think about that as having potentially precipitated this?
Well, look, Emily, I think actually to the contrary, President Trump's approach has actually pushed the North Koreans back a little bit. They threatened to launch missiles at Guam. They haven't done that. In fact, all the missile launches that have taken place to date since their threat against Guam have gone the opposite direction. They've gone northeast instead of down south. That includes today's launch. Now, the short-range launch was on Friday, troubling. This one more troubling. But President Trump, I think, has actually been pretty effective in pushing the North Koreans back. What happens now, I think, is a big question for the president and for the North Koreans.
So what do you think happens now?
Well, I think the president's going to say something. I think he's not going to be pleased. And the question is whether, he does something more than words. I think probably right now, words are probably the right approach. I don't think anything more is called for here. But I think the president will make a very sort of stiff point to the North Koreans. It wouldn't surprise me if he did. And I think the North Koreans are listening. The Chinese are listening. They're pressing the envelope to see how far they can go and how far they can press this president. And I think he's likely to show them, where those lines are.
Exactly. What is the message that North Korea is trying to get across here?
Look, I think North Korea is trying to show, look, we've got a capability. We're not going to be intimidated by the United States. At the same time, they recognize, people often say Kim Jong-un is crazy or like. He's not crazy. He very much wants to keep power and maintain power. Doesn't mean he's not going to press the envelope and try to figure out, how far he can get with the United States and with our allies and how far he can get with his Chinese patrons. And so he's testing the boundaries to see where the edges are. And I think it's important for the president to draw those lines clearly for him.
You were originally coming on the show to talk about cybersecurity and the president's approach to that. There's this decision now to split off Cyber Command, and I'm curious, what do you think that means when it comes to our national security?
Well, look, Emily, I think that a lot of people have been talking about for a while the need to split Cyber Command and to raise it up to its own unified command. That's now happened. I think that's an important step for Cyber Command. It demonstrates cyber's role as a fifth domain of warfare, but more than just a fifth domain, really a cross-cutting domain, because in a lot of ways, cyber's at the heart of the way we fight in air, land, sea, and space. And so it's important, I think, the right step. Now, whether you separate the leadership of NSA and Cyber Command, which hasn't been done yet, I think is still a very much hotly debated issue, and one I think we'll see to be discussed over the next few weeks and months.
And yet you have four people resigning from the National Infrastructure Advisory Council. This is an organization that oversees many of our national security efforts. You have a rift apparently growing between Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and the president. You have a lack of staff in the Department of State. How does that impact our security and our cybersecurity, especially in light of what we're seeing from North Korea today?
Look, it's always important, Emily, as you point out, to have stability in staffing and to have competent, capable people in all these offices. And, to be sure, there's been some controversies ongoing, both with the president's advisors on the outside, the business community, as well as within the administration. The White House has been losing quite a bit of staff. At the same time, I think what's important about the NIAC, it just released a report, in fact, last week, talking about the importance of information sharing and the need for the government to do more with private industry, work closely hand in hand with the financial services and energy industry. And I think that's the right call. I think it's important for the government to sort of do what it's good at, which is working with industry, and not do what it's bad at, which is regulating in a high-tech arena where technology moves very quickly.
So has anything changed, in your opinion, when it comes to our level of security? Are we just as safe as we were before President Trump took office, or have these staffing issues, these divisions within these departments had an impact on the level of protection?
Well, look, I think over the last, 10 years, we've seen a real change in our security posture, which is to say, our allies are less sort of reliant upon us. Our enemies are less afraid of us. I think the president has sought to push back on some of that narrative. At the same time, I think the challenges in the White House and the challenges the president has faced with his own party in Congress and with the opposition has made it harder for him to do his job. And, so as the president's out there tweeting and there's been a lot of controversy, I think it makes it harder to stay on message. And I think the best thing for the White House to do on security and, frankly, on their own agenda is to stay on message and focus on their issues, tax reform, better cybersecurity, the like.
Jamil Jaffer, director of George Mason University's National Security Institute, thanks so much for joining us as we continue to monitor those breaking headlines out of North Korea and Japan. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We'll have more coverage tomorrow and full coverage on what's happening in Asia right now.